Okay, students, welcome back to part 3. This is where we're going to look at a successful student essay. This particular student earned 90 out of 100 on this particular RN essay 1, and I want to talk about why that is. Okay, so if you go back here, again, this on Blackboard in the week 4 learning module before you wrote essay 1, and it talks about how the essay will be evaluated. So the first thing that I'm going to look at when I graded, the first thing that I did look at when I graded your essay was the MLA formatting. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that the header is up here, okay? And that's in Times New Roman 12-inch font, and it is all by itself, okay? Do not put the heading in the header box, okay? And then, of course, there was your name, my name. Please do spell my name right. English 1301.p, well, you are VF, whatever, you need to put your section number in there. But make sure that this is a period here. Dates in MLA are date, the actual day, the month all spelled out, and then the year. You'll see there's no slashes, dashes, or any other kind of punctuation in there. You'll see that everything is double spaced. It's in Times New Roman 12-inch font. And of course the the paragraphs are indented. There's no extra line spacing in here. I noticed some of you did that, and see, it's nice and succinct, gets right to the point. It was a page and a half. Okay, so that was MLA formatting. MLA formatting's looking good. Okay, so title of the essay. Remember, I told you the title of the essay is supposed to be relevant and interesting, so things like essay 1 isn't going to cut it. Here we have examining bias in a news article. Isn't that what you did? Yes, it was. So this is a very relevant and interesting title, and it makes me want to read this essay because I'm like, examining bias in a news article, well, what is that all about? I want to read about it. And so this is a heck of a lot more interesting and relevant than essay 1. Okay, so let's go back here. Introductory paragraph that contains all the elements asked for in the directions for essay 1. Okay, and if you go back down here, it tells you information must appear in the order, title of the article, the author, name of the newspaper. Okay, we go back here. And this was written as a complete sentence. As I mentioned earlier, many of you did not write it as a complete sentence. You just listed those 3 things as a sentence fragment. That's not going to work. Okay, so here right away I see this author's voice. The article I researched for this essay is, there's the name of the article. Now in MLA, article titles are required to be placed in quotation marks. Every main word is supposed to be capitalized. You do not capitalize articles such as a and the, unless of course it's the first word of the article, and you don't do prepositions either. So you'll see here that all of the main words are, except for 2, they're all capitalized and they are in quotation marks. You do not italicize the article or article title. I noticed a lot of you were doing that. Comma, written by Tara Segal Bernard, that's the name of the author, comma, and published by the New York Times. In MLA, any time that you use the name of a publication, it must be italicized. Some of you did it once, but never again. You have to do it every single time in MLA. Okay? If you obviously didn't do those things, then those were points off. But I asked you to tell me the name of the article, I asked you to tell me the author, and I asked you to tell me the name of the newspaper. And so all 3 of these things are here in this first sentence. Then I asked you, again, it was my bad back here. I asked you, it says it must appear, so I said briefly introduce the editor and the author. Now, Veronica here, she, I guess, intuitively followed the fact that she talked about the author here or mentioned her first, so talk about her first here. That would make more sense. Again, that was my bad that I put it back here as the editor and the author first, but if you did that, I did not count off significant points, okay? I might have pointed it out, but I did not count off significant points. Okay, so if we go back here, I ask you to, because I asked you to do some research, right, on the author and such as gender, age, ethnicity, education, any political affiliation or preference or express. You didn't have to talk about all of those things, but I wanted some kind of mention in it. So here we have the author is a graduate of Hofstra University, currently lives in Brooklyn. She's Caucasian. Okay, so white might play into what she writes and how she writes it. Female, obviously, because her name is Tara. And she's approximately in her early 30s. She began reporting for the New York Times. Again, this is italicized in 2008 as a personal finance reporter. So does that what she writes about? And we do find out in a minute that yes, she does. She talks about investing. So obviously we've already established her as an expert on what it is that she's talking about because she's a personal finance reporter. Okay, then we have a transition in here. Many of you did not have a transition in here as you transitioned either from the editor to the author or from the author to the editor. But you have to put a transition in there because you're going to start talking about something else. If you don't put it in there, then as a reader, we're going, okay, wait a second, you're just talking about the author, but now you're starting to talk about somebody else, so why is that? Well, put a transition in there. There's lots of different transitional words and phrases. Again, Google is your friend. Go print off a copy of transitional words and expressions to insert into your writing. Additionally, the editor of the New York Times, again, has to be italicized, is Dean Baquet. Baquet is 63 years of age and is African American. He furthered his education at Columbia University of New York, became editor of New York Times in 2004. Okay, so again, just some brief information about the author, or excuse me, the editor in this case, gender, age, ethnicity, education, and a political affiliation. So those things are there. You didn't have to touch on all of them, but just to give me an idea that you actually did go look this person up, and maybe it will play into what was written in the article, how it was written. We don't know. We haven't explored yet. Okay, then I ask you for a brief summary of the briefly summarize the article. Okay, y'all don't know what brief means. Brief is 1 to 3 sentences. Some of you gave me a whole page. Look, this writer did it in 1 sentence. This article is written for people just starting out in the investing world and discusses the basics. Okay, I don't know why you had to put all that detail in there. I didn't ask you for it. All I basically wanted was a summary. Okay, so 1 to 3 sentences. Stop being so wordy, because that, if you're too wordy, in other words, it takes you too long to get to the point, you risk losing the attention of your audience because they get bored. All right, so that is the introductory paragraph, so should resemble that. This one was very well done. Okay, the first body paragraph, using textual evidence to support, identify examples from the article in which the author made a successful effort towards being less biased or more balanced. And then again, you need to explain it. So you will see here, okay, you also notice that it asks you up here. Okay, so we covered the introductory paragraph. First body paragraph, which begins with a logical transition in a topic sentence. Firstly, because this is the first point, they're starting their paper, right? Veronica's starting her paper. So that's a relevant transition. You'll also notice that this is a topic sentence here. Topic sentence tells me what I'm going to be reading about in this particular paragraph. Ms. Siegel-Bernard did show some less biased writing in her article. If you go back over here, you'll see that that's exactly what I asked for. A successful effort made by the writer being less biased. Okay? Ms. Siegel-Bernard did show some less biased writing. So you need to put a topic sentence there so I know what the heck you're talking about. For example, I ask you back here for an example. So why would you not preface your example with a transition that tells me, oh, for example, for instance, to illustrate. You need to put those things in your writing. Otherwise, if you just said when she stated blah, 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 how do they know that this is an example of less biased writing, especially if your paragraph lacked a topic sentence? For example, comma, when she states that, and then we have this direct quote here. You'll notice these ellipses because they cut out things that were not relevant but wanted to tell their reader that, hey, this quote was larger. You'll notice these things in brackets, which is where the author was, okay, well, the author of the essay, Veronica, is trying to clarify a point. So, yes, the author says your, but what the author of the article is talking about is the reader's money. Okay, and because of job loss, this is some kind of other clarification that Veronica's trying to offer us so that the quote makes sense to the audience. Okay, and then you'll see here she ended the quote, and then you have Siegel-Bernard is the proper parenthetical citation. Okay, Now, you could have said Siegel-Bernard here. You didn't necessarily have to state it here, but I always like students to state it twice so that they know that something needs to go there. And there's no page number because this is an online article, and most online articles will not have a page number. Okay, then you notice that the next thing that I ask for is explain how and why you feel this is occurring. Well, right here we have an explanation. Okay, here's the explanation. Here the author uses the phrase, most financial planners, perhaps, as a way of telling readers that she has probably consulted several for the writing of this article to get the most authoritative information. Okay, because we directly quoted here, we have to cite here again. Okay, but this is the explanation that Veronica had for offering this as an example of less biased writing. You needed to have all three of those things in this paragraph for it to be successful. Okay. Similarly, here in the second body paragraph, a contrasting point. On the other hand, on the contrary, she shows bias when she states, okay, that's the topic sentence right there. And then here we have a direct quote. That's fine. Here it is cited. And then here's the example. Here she seems to be showing primary certitude. Maybe Miss Siegel-Bernard is speaking from personal experience about these applications that have been released but didn't work out for her. However, this does not mean they can't be a success for others. Plenty of people are making money. I believe she's persuading the audience to infer that only index funds are the safest bet, because that's all she really talks about in her article. Okay, so that's a form of bias. Here is the conclusion paragraph. Okay, let's see here. In the concluding paragraph, briefly summarize what you learned from completing the activity. If you go back up here, conclusion paragraph begins with a logical transition. Please do not use in conclusion. Veronica did not. She used in the end. In the end, I learned that many articles do have bias statement as well as less biased statements in them. Okay, there was no formal essay, but those were the two topics of the essay itself, so they needed to be mentioned here in the conclusion. Plus, I ask you back here what you learned from doing this activity about bias. Okay, briefly summarize what you learned from completing this activity. Not what you learned from the article. She says, I learned that many articles do have bias statements as well as less biased statements. Okay, so that touches on the two main topics. Ms. Siegel-Bernard showed both in her article. I have learned that not everything I read or hear is 100% biased or unbiased. As a consequence, I feel that I am now more aware of how to recognize both, having completed this week's essay. So they talk about what they might have learned and how that might play in the future. Okay, this was a very well done essay. She got 90 out of 100. She had her 5 words here using the correct context. She cited everything correctly. It was all very, very well done. Now, the reason why she got a 90 is because she did make some writing errors, which I corrected for this particular exercise because I wanted to show you a perfect paper, okay? I know yours is not going to be perfect, but could you get a 90 on here? Absolutely. If you do everything I ask you to, if you proofread your essay carefully, if before you even start your essay, you contact me and say, okay, Miss Brooks, what you're asking me to do is, and then you can clarify it and run it past me. This is what your essay should have looked like much more than it did. We did not do so well on here, and that's unfortunate. But hopefully now that you've seen a good example, you know what I'm looking for. We went over the directions. We went over the rubric. Hopefully that's going to be very helpful for you. If you have any concerns or questions about Essay 1, you're obviously going to want to contact me as soon as possible. Thank you, and good luck on this week's learning module.